But tonight is all about mapping, and I really thought about this before I got started, because the simplest things, sometimes as Tom said earlier, sometimes the hobby is a plug and play versus a plug and pray, and sometimes it's plug and pray always. And what we mean by that is we pray everything is just going to work. So I want to get started with one of the bullet points that I put out in the emailer, and that would be on quick importing basics. And so I think it goes, there's a lot of things that go without saying, but I'm going to hit on the basics. And that is, if you're mapping sequences from one other person, your life is going to be a little bit frustrating because they may set up groups in their home layout that are different than groups that you have set up in yours. So it's very important that you do take the time and oh, I have a layout here. I'll bring this in. I want to thank Jesse. He's one of our club members. Now, he doesn't know I'm doing this, so huge thank you to Jesse. But Jesse had, and this is one of the reasons why I think of some of these things, because we all have our own unique way of setting up our shows and doing things. And while I was doing some work for him in his layout, I wanted to point some things out that are basics. And what I want to point out mostly is the great job that he did do in setting up groups that match where he's mapping his sequences from. So he has a couple different vendors that he purchases from, and in that respect, he's taken the time to create one set of groups, and he's labeled them with a prefix PPD. And that's very helpful. Even though the auto map won't work, you can set up what are those called? The aliases. You can set up the aliases on the mapping screen and save the alias mapping, and then whenever you click the auto map button, these will come over. But that is probably one of the biggest things: is how should I be taking the time to set up my layout insofar as where I'm getting my sequences from. That is absolutely key number one, and I can't stress this enough. The absolute biggest basic when mapping a sequence into my layout is making sure that wherever I've gotten the sequence from, that I have the same kind of groups, the same names, that they're built exactly the same way. So here is the all display. Now, and he's done all of this work himself. Some of these may not be set up 100% the right way, but at the same time, little things like this are going to stand out. If you put all display here, like the way we do all displays, all house and all yard, doggone it, you're not going to believe it, but my mouse just died. Let's see if I have the other one set. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so as I was saying, his groups, he has them set up. He has a couple things in here, but he only actually needs to have two different things in here. That's the all house and the all yard. If you go to the all house and we click on the all house, you'll see here these are what we have in our all house group. And you want to go through this and do this. You can have two versions of xLights open. And if you have two versions of xLights open, you can verify one alongside of the other. That here's the all display, here's the all house, that's next. So he's got all house, all roof, all windows, all house verticals, snowflakes. So these would be all of the ones that we have in there. Plus we added the porch entrance because it's not in a group. But this is definitely a good thing to have set up so that you can match these up. And so again, this isn't picking on anybody doing things wrong. It's about verifying. So here's our all roof for individual models. He happens to have his all roof here in individual in the roof upper and the roof lower groups. So he's nested them. So he might see a little bit of difference whenever props are effects are applied to those differently. So keep this kind of thing in mind. If I were rebuilding his groups, his roof group would only be just these roof outlines. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Just the roof outlines there. Now he's in 3D. Whoops. Not used. There we go. And I would have to put his icicles on his lower there and his upper. I would have to put those into his all roof group or into the roof upper or roof lower, depending on where they're going to be. So keep this in mind. The biggest holdup is going to be, do you have your groups set up in the manner that where they match where they come from? One thing that also throws people off tremendously is the power of setting up the groups correctly to the vendor setup, how they have it set up in their sequence. So for example, if I were, and I'm in here, this is Brenda Lee rocking around the Christmas tree. This, and one of the things that isn't so apparent to everybody is that the order at which we have these groups placed in the list here, I call it a hierarchy. Whatever's down below usually is going to show up above whenever we're looking at it through the master view. So whatever's on the bottom will shine out on top, and whatever's on the top will blend with whatever's underneath, barring the fact that it will actually let it blend. So on this all roof here, if there's something on the all house or all display, it's not going to show because we have a solid on effect here on the all roof for this example. Another thing, so the hierarchy does matter. And that deals with, if we go into our where did it open up? Way over here. That layer view, this master view, is all set up via our display elements. And so this would be how we have our sequences set up. And what you would need to do is you would need to come in and you would need to open up your layout, create a new sequence, and you would want to take the time to put in order your elements the exact same way that the donated, or the sequence you're mapping from, where those orders can be aligned in the exact same manner. So here, if we open up this display elements here, so I'll move this over across the screen here, and you can see I went ahead and I think we have a PPD view. So this is one he had set up. And of course, he's taken the time to do the work on this himself. So it's good that you can see yours. Whoops, I don't know why that maximized there. It's good that you can see yours here compared to where you're getting it from. And so you do need to create a view here, and you also need to make it master whenever the orders, and you can, while you're in here, after you make it master, that puts everything in the order, so that whenever, after you've imported, it puts it in the order that you're going to have those two matching up, where you'll have the donated sequence or the sequence you're importing from, and then it matches along with what you have here on your home layout. If we're actually mapping, so let's say we're actually mapping, I'm gonna, give me a second and I'll get this off the screen. There we go. And we get into the mapping just in general, the mapping of the sequence, right? If we open up and we'll do a new sequence, we'll physically do a mapping, and I'll go pick something. It doesn't matter. Music. So here, the first step that I always say to do whenever you're doing a sequence mapping, is make sure that you save it as soon as you create the sequence, because the last thing you want to do is go through all this trouble. And I always save it what the MP3 is. That's just easy for me to remember. And then I go to the import screen. Now, generally, I don't do anything with display elements until after I've mapped. So I don't even go into display elements until last. And I go into import effects. We'll go to our package sequences, and I'll go find Brenda Lee, and we'll import from the zip file, which is how you should be importing. Whenever you, this is a neat little feature that's in .16 and up, is it tells you where you're currently importing a zip from a zip sequence from. So that's kind of neat. And then we get to our mapping screen. So real general, real quick basic about the mapping screen, okay? You can take the time, and obviously he uses the prefixes, which I'm not going to map all these out. It's easy to find them because they are all under PPD, which makes it like super simple. But you can take the time and you can say, here's all house. Oh, and that's a bug. That's a bug. When you grab something and move it over here, it jumps. I don't know why it does that. That is definitely a bug, and we don't like it. Okay, so here's all house. You can come down here and double click and bring it over. Here's your all house decorations. I don't know why I dropped it there, but and we can update our aliases. If you're using that prefix type thing, you can update the aliases. I don't care to use the aliases, because if you map things consistently, like this time this sequence has spiral all, but next time the sequence doesn't, so you grab the clockwise spiral or the counterclockwise and you apply it to something similar, you may be double mapping, or something might not map correctly. So I don't care for the aliases as much as what most people might, but in this circumstance where everything's lined up, you could come in here and you could individually drag these over and create an alias mapping, or you could even save a mapping and have a mapping where you save it from, where you save it and utilize that mapping. So there's different ways to think about it. I'm not too much of a fan of the aliases, only because if you've taken the time to build these, then just create a map and import from the map. Now the basics on this screen are kind of important, because it depends on what you're doing when you're mapping, and so it's important to know exactly what it is that you see on this screen. Up here in the top right, this box may be checked for you. It says lock effects upon import, or on import, and this is nice because it satisfies one of the things that are in the xLights check sequence. So when you check sequence, and sometimes effects that are locked have the ability to render quicker whenever you're using render caching, and so there's a check in xLights check sequence where it checks to see if your effects are locked, and if they're not locked, you get a little not error but warning, or hey, just to let you know your effects aren't locked and they're not caching, and so it may take longer to render. You can speed up your render times in some instances by having this checked. I personally didn't find render caching very helpful for me, so I turned it off. And plus, if you use render caching, it could fill up your computer with a lot of files. So depends on what's going on. I generally leave this unchecked. That's me. This remembers your setting. So if you updated and the locked effects is set, it's automatically, whenever you install xLights, when they added this feature, it's automatically set. But if you unset it, or if you uncheck it, xLights will remember to leave it unchecked, thank goodness, and I really appreciate that. But this is a nice feature if you do heavily rely on render caching to continuously go in and out of sequences. Erase effects on imported models. So this feature is wonderful if you've already mapped a sequence, but you really don't like that your pixel stakes, or your pixel poles, or your exploding stars, they're not doing they just don't look as good. There's something that they could do better. So you figure that I'll come in and I'll remap something different to it. Let's say I'll put the candy canes on my exploding stars. You can erase the effects that are already sitting inside your sequence and overwrite them by just grabbing those and applying them if you've already mapped the first time. If you're mapping for the first time of any sequence, there's no need to have this checked, but it is a very nice feature. It only activates whenever you turn it on. If you turn it on once, it doesn't always stay on. So that's a nice thing too. Import blend mode. really quick, the blend mode is how we blend effects in xLights. So if I go back to, here's Brenda Lee rocking around the Christmas tree, right? And we go back to our first example. And I go ahead and I click on this all roof. I click on this all roof, and up here, let's say I put something on the all display, and I make it blue. Now I'm not hurting my sequence at all. But notice how the roof line has those specific colors there, red. It has those specific colors there, red, green, white, and then red again. And then it recycles that because we have it selected. Notice that it's not overwriting, it's not blending. This is what we call layer blending. Now here is another version of layer blending. Let me move this over here. We'll move this right here because now we'll see some blending. If we look at the effect, the spiral effect on the roof, you see how these are blending together now? Now what if this said 3D? You can see the blue through the icicles here. And that's what layer blending is. And to find this layer blending mode, that's in this sequence settings. So if you are importing from a sequence that has allow blending between models checked right here in your sequence settings, and that's what this allows it to do. If we disallow it or we deselect it, and then I go back up here and I click off and I click back on it, even though those earlier they were blending, now they're not blending. So you can physically see what's going on here whenever it comes to layer blending. So in this instance it says import model blend mode, blending is enabled in the source file. So mapping the sequence by the original sequencing, whenever it was done, it didn't have enable blend. It had enable blending mode in, and we just shut it off. You can see we shut it off, and you can see here how it's still going. How you can't see the blue from behind. It'll import it whether you have it set in your settings or not, and this is per sequence, and this is a really nice feature. So imported media. Imported media would be, let's see, view or change options. This would be selecting targets for your media. Where would you like the media to be stored? So this you can tell it where to save different things if that's something that you want to do. It gives you a little bit more control. If you want to change something, you can select where to save it and so forth. But I just usually leave that as a default. That's not really super important. Now the last thing that always happens on every single one of your mappings, every time that you import a sequence, is it's always going to import the timing tracks that are available in this sequence. So for example, you can see it has a beats, it has a lyric track, it looks like. Here's a lyric track 2 and a lyric track 3, and then you have a bars, a free, and a basic. And if I actually bring the other one in, you can see that that's all of these in here. Beats, a lyric track, another lyric track, another lyric track, bars, free, and basic. So when you import one time, it's going to automatically bring these in unless you deselect or uncheck them. However, if you bring them in a second time, it will import them a second time if you put a second check there. So you could double up on your timing marks. Not that that's super helpful, but just be forewarned. xLights will read your sequence if you're, let's say you're going back in and you're going to erase some effects. Let's say you're going to remap those exploding stars with the candy canes. You may have that checked, and you'll notice that none of these are checked. That's because xLights already knows, hey, I already imported this once. I have these exact timing names. I'm not going to bring those in. Now, if you happen to go back to that original sequence and did some changes and added another timing mark, that one would light up and say, yeah, bring me in because I'm not in this one already. So that's as basic as I can get here on this exact screen. I do like the idea of saving your mapping. If you use a specific vendor that doesn't change very much, sometimes they change them from year to year, meaning change the props that are in their show, and so their mappings may not always be the same every time you map from one sequence, or you get something with a different version of the layout, meaning you get a different you get a different holiday season. So let's say it's a Halloween sequence versus a Christmas sequence. You can create maps on that as well. I'm mapping from PPD's Halloween layout onto my Christmas layout, and you can save it as that so that you don't have to look that up all the time, or you always have to be on your toes with where am I going to put this. So saving a map for any of the vendors or the people that you map sequences from is a very, very helpful tip. And those are the basics. Now, in the newsletter, in the email, I also mentioned I wanted to talk about fixing some mapping issues. One of the things that can be very, very, very hard for some people who have a new layout and don't have a lot of props in their show, and but yet they see all of the wonderful things that are happening in the sequence, and then when they go to map, they don't see any of that stuff happening. And what I'm talking about is I'm talking about some very specific props. And one of those props, I'm going to go ahead and close this sequence here, and I'm actually gonna open. I want to open. I want to do a new sequence animation. That's what we want. I want to show very specifically one of the things that can trip people up, and that could be roofing groups or roof outline groups. So it's important that you understand where some things come from, because if you don't, you won't get the similar results. And one of the things that seems to cause a little bit of frustration is how roof groups can be set up. So here in this instance, this is our PPD roof group here. I'll go ahead and make this the master, just to be sure. And here we have the roof group. If I put an on effect on the roof group, there's the blue on effect that we had from earlier. And then I put a effect on the roof lower, and which notice this is underneath it here. I put another effect on here. We'll call it the white on effect. Now you have a blue all roof, but you have a lower roof that's all white. If I delete that, let's put a color wash in here, and I'm going to do a vertical and horizontal fade. Now you can see the blue come through, but the white is actually taking priority over the blue roof because it's lower on the list. It's being rendered over top of what's above it. And when we go back and we look at these groups very specifically, here's your all roof group. You have individual models in here with all of your roof outlining items. So if it's a roof outline somewhere, if it's any roof group item, I'm not talking about decorations or window frames or verticals. I'm just talking about the roof. They're individual models here. But if we go to roof upper, where are you at? Roof. There we go. Here's roof lower, which we had selected earlier. Now it's just the roof lines that are specifically on the lower end. Let me get the chat up because it disappeared. The roof lower is the individual models of the same, but they're shared between this roof lower or the all roof group. So they're shared between them, but they're in different groups. And the reason that they're in different groups is, and I like to think of these as something I would call as a submodel. It's not a submodel, but it's a smaller version or a lesser version of the main group, or the main prop. The main prop is, to me, the all roof group. Now I'm only zeroing in just on the lower roof portions. So if you have, let's say you have a single story home. Where's my annotate here? Hold on just a second. Let me annotate real quick. Let's say and I'm going to do red. There we go. Okay. So let's say we didn't have this roof, this upper roof. Let's say we just had a lower roof. And let's say this is kind of what your house might look like. It has maybe one of these dormers here, and then you have a lower one here. What you could consider doing is make this your upper roof, and then make something like this your lower roof. Or maybe you're doing down here, this is your lower roof, and this all might be your upper roof. You have a couple different options. Some of us, like me, my own home is just a single straight line across, and so that's my roof upper. I don't have a roof line that runs along the ridge of the top of my roof. So how I ended up doing it was, what I ended up doing, because my house is it's a ranch style, nothing fancy, but I ended up running my lower roof line like this and calling that my upper, and then I have an edge line here, and I have a split entry, so I have this little bump out here. These are 2 bump outs, and then I call these lower parts here are my lower roof. And now I know that might be a little silly, but it works. It does a really good job. And how I identify the uppers and the lowers really makes a difference in the sequencing to me. But that was how I came up with a way to activate both the roof upper and the roof lower and take advantage of it. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I don't have icicles on my lower roof. So what do? And in that instance, whenever I don't have something, then just double up that same item that you already have. Let's say you don't have these icicles, right? Let's say you do not have these. Let's say you don't have these icicles. I'll go ahead and zoom out of here. And now you don't have any icicles here, right? Let's pretend you have no icicles. I'm going to utilize these models, these upper roof models. Come on, won't touch them now. There we go. I would put these individual models right here, this roof upper here, I would put these into my icicle group as well. I would double up them into my icicle group. And the reason why is because if there's an effect on the icicles and I don't have icicles, I'm going to miss the effect for it because I don't have icicles. But if you put your roof outline into your icicle group because you don't have icicles, now it's going to take the effects on, and so you're pretending you have icicles by putting your gutter lines in there. And that's the other thing that we call those. So if I go back up here, there's a gutter line. These would all be the gutter lines. I call the gutter lines the front-facing outlines of your house. This is where kind of the water would fall into your, let's say, your gutters. But I also did the upper edges of the dormers. I think that makes a good, nice outline type thing. But the other side of it is your icicles. And if I were putting in my house situation, my lower roof line that has no icicles on it, I throw that into the icicle group anyway. And that way, whenever I map effects over, I get all the gutter effects, I get all the icicle effects, I get all of the roof upper, and there we go. I get all the roof upper and the roof lower groups, all the effects off of those, and then I certainly get all of the individual all roof group effects, period. So I'm not missing anything, and that can happen. That I'm pretty sure I answered this question earlier last week. I had that question, so I'll just put that back in place, and hopefully that looks good. Yeah, that looks good. We'll go ahead and lock that up. So, Jesse happens to be in the room, and I was showing off his layout. He didn't know that I was going to do this, but I wanted to share it with him. So let me move on here. So that's one of the things that you want to pay attention to is when you don't have certain things in your layout that they may have, how do you navigate to get all of that data? And that's one of the things that you can do is you can navigate that, and that's kind of a workaround, to have a workaround so that you get all of those effects and that they're proper and that they look good, right? So I want to quickly jump over to verifying model accuracy. And the model accuracy is very important in my life because I spent a lot of time creating submodels. And so in my layout here, I've taken the time to color code, and I did a video on this, a Twinkle Tip Friday video on this a few weeks, maybe a couple months ago. And the idea behind these color codes here that you see on this screen, the darker the color is means to me it's a full size, it's the all roof group, or it's the all something group. It's your basic groups. And then the lighter colors happen to be something like a submodel group. So those roof icicles and the gutters and all of those, I consider the icicles and gutters, these being two different submodel groups. They're not submodels, and I know that. But I see them as submodels because if I put something on my all roof group, let's say I put a color wash on my all roof group, and then I come down here and I put on the icicles, I have like let's say single strand or spirals, and we put green spirals here. We do two repetitions. We make 3D. Now we have this kind of layered effect. Not everything's lit up. It kind of looks nice, but I'm layer blending with my other layers. So this, I really take a lot of thought and that I put into this. And then if I want to add a zing across the gutters, I can put a single strand effect in here, and I can have it stand out with something completely different. Like there's pink. So chase size, and then you can make it fade out. And there you go, and you get that little zing across the roof outline. And I'm not putting that on to everything. I'm just putting it onto one thing so that it gives it a little bit of excitement. So this is one of the reasons why it's important to build your groups, because and test them and to see that they are working in that manner. So that's one thing is this order of operation. This I call it hierarchy, but the order that effects are rendered in xLights, and whatever's on the bottom is going to stand out over top of what's above it whenever you're in the master view. So another thing that I like to do is I like to test out my submodels, because if you built your submodels or you've created submodels, many of us who sequence consistently, we have a way that we sequence those effects onto those submodels so they appear a certain way whenever you see an effect come out. And so one of the things that I do whenever I'm testing a submodel is I put the single strand effect on it. I'm going to turn these roof off real quick. I go right to the submodel, and I will change my my render style to per model default. Okay, and for the arms, I would make sure that they're going to go, and I'm going to make this really long here. There we go. That they're traveling in the same direction, like all of them are actually going up one side and then flipping around and going down the other side. And that to me is super important, because different sequencers submodel their models, submodel their models a different way. There we go. Let me show you what I mean. If we come in here and we go into submodels, and I click on the submodels for the Ice Queen here, and we go back here, there's the main arms, that's what the snowflake arms, that's the snowflake arms, and here's the short ones. If I go in here and I do something called vertical buffer layout, and I use that checkbox there, and I do vertical buffer layout, I'll do it for one but not the other. Look at what the results are when we re-render this. Look at how the arm is going around this way, whereas on the, and that's the vertical buffer. It's changing how the effect is being rendered. And so if you're seeing differences in your sequencing, it could be, and this is why you need to test your models, the sequence where you're mapping from may have that checked on it. We don't use that. Other sequencers may. And so what you might have to do is you might have to go duplicate, make another group, and make it a very specific group, call it PPD snowflake arms, because Clyde does it stupid different than how this other person does it, right? So keep in mind, things like this definitely happen, and they happen a lot, especially whenever you have different sequencers that sequence different ways. But if you don't know that this is an issue, this could be an issue for you. Or maybe when you're mapping from their sequences into your layout and you're following maybe something that we've done, maybe that's something that you need to create for their layout so that you can have a better mapping for it. But testing your models and making sure that they work with the pattern or flow, how they were set up in the original pre-created sequence is really, really important. I'm going to go fix this before I forget I did that, because that would be bad. That'd be real bad. Submodels. And that's this one. Turn that off. And we'll go back in here. And you can just take your arrow keys and arrow from one down. This is the snowflake rings. These are acting the way that I expect them. Each one of these individual rings is a ring on the snowflake, and they're all stacked up together. Then you have the snowflake tips. Each tip's going right in order. And then we go onto the spinners. And again, single strand per model default. There we go. And it's doing a shockwave from the center out to the outer side. And I generally don't use this as an effect very much. I much prefer to just put a shockwave on. But if I'm just doing something like this, and this is what's nice, because you can play with different render styles. But look how you can have fun there. Just kind of change the render styles and you get different things there. So anyway, I digress. Let's go back to per model default. Oop. I don't have it saved in there. It's okay. Per model default. Okay, and then the same thing with the small arms. Are they doing the same things that the big arms do? Yeah, they do. They're set up to go from the inside to the out, from the left to right, with a single strand. Here's your spinner alert. One of my favorite groups. I love playing with this one. So it goes out, over, and then back in. Really neat. And then you have the spinner rings at the very bottom there. That's a fun one to mess around with and have a good time with. And then the same thing goes for all of the PPD wreath special submodel groups. So here's your pedals. And sadly, there's a bug in xLights. You see a couple of these pixels turned off here. There's a couple pixels turned off. It's because those pixels are sharing nodes between them. There is a fix. You can fix it in the layout so it doesn't stack them up. It eliminates the duplicates. I just never went around to do that. But the pedals are there. Here are the two center rings that are perfect rings that Rob had built in. Here's the center pedals that go in order in a circle around it. Here's the spiral all, and here's the individual spirals, so you can see spiral counterclockwise, and this is the clockwise spirals. I don't know why they're I don't know why I labeled them that way, but I did. Diamond arms. The diamond arms per model default goes straight across. It doesn't have a specific path. It just takes it from left to right. That's the per model default. The diamond outer arms, same thing. It takes them from the left to the right of the diamond, no matter where it's at on the PPD wreath. The wreath stars. And these just go in, these are just the jagged star lines that are inside there. And then there's offset ones that are opposite the odds, I guess, maybe. And they just go in order just like that, too. So if your models aren't going in the proper order, or they don't look the same, then you may have to go in and you may have to update. I do recommend that you take the time, if you haven't, go to the PPD website, because when you do, you can solve a lot of your submodel issues by going to the Learning tab and clicking on PPD certified models. If you're using some of the models that are not in our layout, maybe they're from Boscoyo, maybe they're from Gilbert, maybe EFL, we've uploaded our models there, plus a significant number of other ones. And if you want to import these, this should import your it should also import the groups that they're attached to, and we've kind of ironed out some of those pixel order bugs that maybe you're experiencing, or if you have suggestions for ones that you'd like to see that we haven't done yet, go ahead, and there's this field down here on the bottom. Just so you know, at the moment we found a bug, an importing bug, that doesn't seem to be merging the groups, but I think Scott's working on fixing them. But I'm stuck in I'm not stuck in 16, but I'm staying on 16 for now because I'm not having any issues with it. Let me look at chat here for a quick second. Robert says, does the source sequence render styles on effects import with the sequence? Yes, it does. So if you're mapping a sequence, however the render style is on here does get imported into here. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. Now, one thing I will say about render styles, and I'll go over here to the layout tab. One thing, whenever you click on a model here, or I'm sorry, a group, you can force a specific render style, default layout mode. These are the render styles that you can force it to when you're sequencing on your own. So if you've decided that you only want to sequence this group with horizontal stacked or vertical stacked or vertical per model strand or overlay centered, you can force every xLights effect to render this without changing the render style. So this is forcing a render style. But if you want something different, you have to tell it to be different. So otherwise, if you have default and you import something that says default, it will do the overlay center because you mapped a default render style. So that's a good question. That's something that doesn't come up very often. So there's that. Dale says, in the mapping, how does sorting play into the topic? Sorting, I think Dale, let me know if I answered that question down in chat at the bottom there. Or what do you mean specifically by sorting? In the mapping file, I find that uppercase and lowercase cause matching to not happen, even though the names are the same. Yes, there was a point in time where whatever capitalization was used in here, that it didn't matter, and then in an update, the developers made it so that the cases did matter. And I think we had something, maybe it was all stars, that was capital A, lowercase l, capital S, and lowercase stars, right? So that didn't map over. So we just set the definition to be all in that instance. And then sometimes some of the older ones that I open up, and we're doing some sequence updates right now, and you open up some of the older ones in the new layout and it says you can't find this group, what would you like to map it to? Then we map it to that. But as we've gone through time, there was definitely a change. So some of the older sequences may have those old upper and lower cases where it didn't matter, and now it does. So we've kind of finalized, we've settled on what we're going to do there. John says, do you have any tips for huge showstopper spinners? Do I have any tips other than, and he said, I downloaded your models, linked the alert, where would that go as an example? So one of the things I would say, if you're curious about our sequencing, let me go ahead back over here to the you know we make a certified model, and you know that you can download that. But one of the things that many people don't know is, and Robert took a lot of time to really write this out. Right here at the top of the sequence store, if you go to Christmas sequences, other sequences, it's right here at the top of these pages. There's a couple links here at the top here. Oh, it's not. It only shows on the Christmas one. Maybe he can update that for the other, because we'll have to do another one for that one, for the other. So right here it says, click here to download the original layout grouping sheet, or click here to download the pro layout grouping sheet. This is, if I go ahead and click on this, you should be able to open this up and read this really, really easily. And right here, using this is going to hopefully answer your question, John. When you're mapping and you have a question about one of our models specifically, you can go to this list, and where does it say spinners? Spinners, here we go. See how it says spinner alert? Look, use submodels that look like radiation signals. You can use this also. You can also use this for wider submodels and miscellaneous props. This model is very similar to the snowflake arms here, I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and show you the differences here. Spinner alert looks like this. So it has a go out and then return back in, just like the snowflake arms do. And that's one of the reasons why I created it, because I really like that look where they would go out and they would come back in. I loved that had that look, and I wanted to do that with the spinner. So that's kind of where the snowflake arms kind of do that. You can apply that to other things. If I had, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I use the showstopper spinner with the certified models, and I think that may not map to it. I don't know that I mapped that to the spinner group. I may have. I probably did. But this is the instance where I like it, where it's got a loop to it, and it kind of, I think it gives it a good look. Same example would be for the big arms and the small arms. So pretty much, I don't want to say every effect is like that, but if it has a single straight path or maybe a slightly curved path, that's where you're going to map that to. And I'm as fast as I can open up another version of xLights so I can end done. Now, the other thing I will tell you is, before you start mapping, one of the things that you can do, come on, there we go. One of the things that you can do is you can look at the model. So here, is that what you said, the showstopper spinner? So here's the groups that I put it in. I didn't specifically put it on. I used the PPD wreath groups for it more. That's what I used it for. So it will do similar things that I have there. Now, what would I do to check it? I would go into the submodel group. Where's the submodels? And I would look at them. I would say, okay, that's really brilliant. Here we go. Maybe the circle's even and the circle's odd. Those, because that has a return. It probably goes in from the center and goes outward. And keep in mind, there's that vertical buffer. There's circles with a vertical buffer checked, and see how it says the V? Those mean those that have the vertical buffers in them, but they also have the non-vertical buffers too. So that was a nice addition from Michael whenever he created that. So the radiation could go to that, or the spinner alert. The small arms, well, you've got here's your swirls. You could do the swirls here. You could use the small arms here if you wanted. Here's the long, and here's the short spinner arms. So there's two different sets of spinner arms that you could apply those to. So what you want to do is you want to go into the submodels and see what submodels are there, and then if you're going to be creative on your own, instead of using, let's say you've downloaded our model, if you're being creative on your own, what you would have to do is you would have to come in here, find these, and you would have to individually add those specific things. There's the long ones. You'd right click, add selections to existing group, and you'd put them in the group that you're mapping to that fits the best. But this is all manual, so this takes time. So that's rather lengthy explanation for you as well. I think does that answer your question there? Let's see. How do you get the singing faces rendered in your sequences? So I do the singing faces the exact way in my home layout as we do in the pro layout, because I set them up that way. Here's the Grinch. I'll go into the faces effect, and I will literally build what I want the face to look like. So my Grinch has forced custom colors. This is Robert's model, but I enhanced it some. And I have a face outline. There's my face outline. He's in bright green. I could get his little belly here a little darker color. I could come in and give that a darker color. But his mouth is red, and I've forced it to be that custom color there. And then over here I have the eyes open, and then the eyes closed because he has yellow eyes. And then I have beady little purple eyeballs. That's his little pupils in there. So whenever his eyes are open, he has purple eyes. So that's one way to do it. Now that's the Grinch. Now if I have the singing light bulbs, where are my singing light bulbs? Right here. These are very simple. I set the singing light bulbs up exactly the same way. Here's my faces. All my faces. They're white lips. His outline. He's a red bulb. So he's hard coded as always red. And then I have the gold here for his base. And I have blue eyes for him, the open and the closed. So this I actually did a whole video on exactly how to do that. I've done the exact same thing, and this is what force custom colors means. Whenever it forces a custom color on the face effect, on the face, whenever you put the face effect down, and then you add the show outline. And it doesn't matter what colors you select here. It forces the custom color. So he's always going to have a green outline because he's a tree. He's always going to have a red mouth because that's how I have it set up. And he's always going to have white eyeballs because I literally forced those specific custom colors onto my props. And that way I never have to think about it. Whenever I import something, those are all done. I spent the time. I just did them one time. I actually did a couple. Here's a blue tree. There we go. He's got a blue outline. Here's a girl tree. She's got pink outline. You can do lighter and darker versions. You know, a couple different things there. That's how I get my singing faces. So again, these are all questions that are being asked in chat here. So good, John. Just take your time with it. Like you're not gonna figure it out all in one quick sweep whenever it comes to submodels. But it is important to test your submodels. It is important to go in and does this flow correctly? Some of them, if you put them in groups, if you have a group of these submodels in here and one's going the opposite way than the other, then you know you need to go in and make changes to it. You need to fix it. And the last thing, the last thing is refreshing your old sequences. I want to talk about this because what happens a lot of times is we have a significant number of sequences in our store. We have over 300 now. In fact, I've lost count. It's exciting because we have such a huge selection, but now I'm losing count, which is kind of scary. And as you move along in your travels with xLights and your sequencing, one of the things that you're going to be faced with is, how do I deal with my old sequences? And so we always use the Pro layout. That's the layout that many of us we need to use to map to our sequences. But some people have very basic layouts, so they just use the original layout. If you get some high definition props though, and now you need to add some sequencing in, what I would recommend is just looking at some of the things that are already built into the sequence. So if we're in Brenda Lee rocking around the Christmas tree, we'll open this back up. If you've added a new prop in from the prior year and you have the original layout, one of the things that you can just do is you can look at the effects that are in a certain model group somewhere and say, hey, I'll pick a couple effects out and I'll pop those and I'll copy those over and I'll put them onto something else. That's probably the easiest way. But you probably want to play with some of those effects and put those, if you have some high definition props, you're going to have to change some render styles to make them work. You're going to have to play with the render styles over here if you copy and paste them to, let's say, a submodel group to make them work in a way that looks good. But you're going to spend some time doing that. My suggestion is the first thing that you want to do whenever you already have these sequences is go get the upgrade, pay for the upgrade, and then after you upgrade, now just remap your sequences. Every year, I never run the same show every year. I have plenty of choices of songs, and just because you have 20 sequences doesn't mean you have to use them all every single night. You can create different show schedules and show playlists. You could have a Tuesday night, you could have a TSO night, you could have a kids night, which is only kid fun songs. You could have an adult night at 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays when the kids are in bed or supposed to be, or whatever. You have you have so many options. But to refresh your old sequences, what I would do is I would start over with mapping or remapping from the original sequence and doing that every single year. And I know that sounds painful for some people, but it's the cold hard truth. It is just easier to remap a sequence from a prior year than it is to sit there and find all of the things that it's doing and it's not doing. Because I can tell you from experience, when I'm watching a sequence before I put it in the store, I have to sit there and say, I actually go back and I map it. I not only map it to my layout, but I map it to 2 or 3 other layouts before I package it up for the store. And the reason is because different layouts are set up differently, have different props in them, and I want to make sure that all of the props have significantly enough sequencing so when you do map, you don't have to worry if it's enough. I would rather over-sequence a song for you guys, and personally, it's a personal thing, and you guys be able to stop and say, you know, this is a lot of stuff. Maybe I should just delete a little bit of it. It needs to be a little less busy. Go ahead, delete away, put the off effect over top of things. Because I would rather you do that than you be disappointed because, well, I paid for the sequence and it really didn't do anything, and I have all these props that aren't on, and now you have to go in and resequence it all of it yourself, and that's it's way easier to delete effects than it is for us to not include them. I mean, it would take me half the time to sequence something like that, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that you want to bring something in that looks good as it is, as best as it can be, but if it's too much for you, you always have the option to delete things off. You always have the option, once the sequence is mapped in, to do some finagling and copying and pasting and moving it to other effects to see if that suits a little better, or re-importing and using a different import style or a different import model from the candy canes, for example. Instead of putting the candy canes there, putting those on the pixel pulse stars so that they're a little bit more interesting. So any more questions? Let's see. I do see another one popped up there. I think that's enough for now. Let's see. That I don't see any other questions. We'll go ahead and move over to the rest of the night, which is going to be an open mic session. If you have questions, Dale was talking a little earlier. It was a rather interesting discussion. We'll go ahead and allow the microphones to be unmuted here in a second, but for everybody, if you're on Facebook, come in and join us in the room. We're not going to record the rest of this. We're going to take off, and hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Robert, thank you for bringing us out on up on the Facebook, and everybody, thank you for joining us. Clyde signing out here. Have a wonderful evening. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. Take care, and goodbye for now, guys.
Bye-bye!